As the director and coordinator of this Health Quackery workshop, I'm truly pleased to be able to address you about the topic of why people go to Quacks. Working with you closely during this last week and a half has been a nice experience, but a little bit informal. This gives me an opportunity to support some of the statements that have already been made in this workshop, to bring together a few loose ends that have occurred, and to present some of my philosophies regarding the health quackery problem that exists in our communities. So I'm pleased to be able to, in a more formal way, talk to you about this problem. On the surface, the answer to the question of why people go to quacks is a simple one, especially in a free society such as ours in the United States. People go to quacks because they want to. Period. No other reason. That's it. Why they are fooled, what makes them susceptible, and what causes a breakdown in their resistance are much more complex issues. I'd like to explore a few of the factors involved in these issues. I think it's safe to say that in playing his confidence game, the quack preys on our human weaknesses and confidences. For example, I honestly believe that the qualities of faith, frustration, desperation, impatience, fear, superstition, gullibility, ignorance, responsiveness, and stupidity describe each of us to varying degrees. Describes each of us to varying degrees. Each one of these characteristics can fit us, and a combination certainly. Let us examine each of these qualities and examples of how we could be taken in. I'd like to start with the first one I mentioned, faith. The example I'd like to use is an article that I would call a prayer cloth. This prayer cloth was a healing gimmick used in the southwest portion of the United States. It was placed over the ailing portion of the body for, quote, healing, deliverance, and driving out evil spirits, unquote. There's no doubt that this artifact, coupled with honest prayer, appeals to one's faith. No doubt, not in my mind. There is no doubt that it is worthless. Let me emphasize that the gimmick is worthless. I take no issue with the faith concept, unless gimmicks are used or the faith concept refutes medical science. Let me also emphasize this point that was made by Mr. H. Doyle Taylor, Director of the Bureau of Investigation of the American Medical Association, when he was talking on chiropractic several days ago. If you remember, he indicated and implied, and I want to make a more direct statement on this point, that as the battle has stepped up on chiropractic, many of them are going to be pushed into the faith healing concept. We can look for this to be occurring. You can imagine some of the problems we're going to have then. As now, from a point of view of scientific investigation, they have no legs to stand on. They go into faith healing and twisting their thinking around. We're really going to have a hazard on our hands. Another concept I'd like to demonstrate, another quality of humans, and that quality is frustration. And an example I'd like to use would be something we might call royal jelly compounds. The royal jelly compounds have been used in creams and lotions for the purpose of rejuvenating aging skin. The logic behind the use of this substance is, number one, the queen bee lives longer than her sisters. Number two, the queen bee feeds on royal jelly. Number three, royal jelly must therefore be effective in delaying the aging process in humans. At $10 an ounce, women fight to buy the product based on that logic. According to George Larrick, the former commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration, royal jelly is of no value to humans. It is clear that the woman who uses such a product has become frustrated in other attempts to restore her vanishing youth. By the way, maybe her skin problem that she has in terms of early aging of the skin could have been prevented by getting less sunshine when she was 18 years old. We know for a fact that the effect of sun exposure to skin in terms of deep tanning causes an early aging of the skin. Now, you women that like to sunbathe now, think about that when you're 35. Cause and prevention concepts are fairly important in something like this. Desperation was another quality I pointed out. And an example I like to use is a broad concept in terms of arthritis quackery. I don't have an artifact to demonstrate for you, but I have a story I want to tell you. A leading member of the Arthritis and Rheumatism Foundation, who was afflicted with arthritis and completely aware of the variety and abundance of arthritis quackery, he himself admitted a willingness to pay several $100s for any alleged relief. If somebody could promise him or guarantee him or make some kind of statement that he would get relief from his arthritis, he would be willing to take them up. Now, we're not talking about an average citizen. We're talking about a man who is a member of the Arthritis and Rheumatism Foundation, and one of their prime purposes is to fight arthritis quackery. He said he'd be willing to try it, provided that he could remain anonymous. The only thing he would be afraid of was that people would find out that he was conned. We who do not have to suffer the pain and the anguish from this disease can only imagine how desperate one can become from this discomfort. Another characteristic or quality I described to you was the one of impatience. And an example of a product I'd like to use, and I once again do not have an artifact to demonstrate this, is a product called Bustophyl that you'd be able to buy for the wonderful price of $3.95 a bottle. I don't know if any further explanation is needed on what the purpose of it is. But can you picture the young spindly girl massaging herself with this lotion? In all probability, her underdevelopment is only a part of her problem. I like to use this as an example of the fact that to some degree she is at least partially suffering from impatience. But this is something the young people are bothered with. This is a pressure that is exerted on them. And we've got to keep this in mind in terms of our quackery programs for younger people. It's not a matter of quackery occurring only for the older person. The young person can be just as susceptible. Another example or quality that I described to you is a quality of fear. The example I'd like to show you is one that we've had in our display case that we call the Sullivan County Cancer Cure. It is truly logical to expect some fear resulting from the unknowns in the cause of cancer and the surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy treatment of cancer. So I'm establishing that it's reasonable for a person to fear these things. The surgery, the treatments are radical, the fears are fantastically high, so we should expect fear to exist. But should this fear result in a person resorting to using horse urine, clay, a turkey feather, petroleum jelly, and a laxative as their cancer therapy? Some have. As late as 10 years ago, this combination of ingredients was sold right here in our own state for $50. I made one minor change in these articles. I substituted a feather from a pigeon for that of a turkey. To me, it's much more appropriate. The approach that the person would use is to take a pigeon feather, I think that's what we should use, dip it in the horse urine, make the mud solution. Wherever the person felt they had the cancer, they would use the feather to paint it on their body to make sure that in the evaporation of the horse urine that the healing energy would not be lost. The person would take a common petroleum jelly and smear that on top. And that was to direct the poisons, the healing energy into the body to be more effective. And then the person would take a laxative to purge their body of the poisons that were driven into their system from the cancer. There's only one of those products that had any reasonable amount of effectiveness. You guess which one. Another quality is a quality of superstition. The examples I'd like to use are the buckeye and the tranquil stone. Several decades ago, the buckeye was used to ward off disease. What you do is just put that in your hip pocket. It was primarily a preventive measure for arthritis and rheumatiz. This was the approach used. As long as you had the old buckeye in your hip pocket, you were reasonably safe. Well, we don't fall for that kind of stuff now. In our modern societies, we don't believe this. By the way, do you know what a buckeye is? This is a buckeye. Do you know what it is? It's a person from Ohio. And we further describe them as small, worthless nuts. So anytime any of those folks from Ohio give you a rough time for being a Hoosier, you just remember what they are. So we don't fall for this gimmick anymore. Our modern societies, our modern generations don't. We might see our grandparents still carrying these things around, but for the most part, this concept has been eliminated from our society just by our growing up and becoming knowledgeable. We don't fall for it. In our modern societies, instead, the evil spirits are chased away with other things. There's a wide variety that would be used. I wanted to demonstrate the tranquil stone. Advertised within the last year, and here is the commercial, to work like a charm in solving your problems. It appears to receive its potency from its scientific shaping for modern therapy. Superstition is obviously well ingrained in man's makeup to fall for this one. Read it. Read it. Pass that around and you take a look at it. You determine whether you would fall for it. For $1, I'd venture to guess a number of those were sold, and somebody made quite a bit of money. You wonder about how a person would fall for a scheme like that. I might just relate another incident that occurred. Is that some fella advertised in a national magazine, send $1 to box so-and-so in the name of a city. That's all he had in the commercial. He just did that. I think he collected $100,000. $100,000 he picked up by people who just, somebody advertised for you to send some money to somewhere, and he was tried for fraud and found guilty of fraud, I'm happy to report, because he was implying that if people sent him some money that he would be giving something back in return. Oh, I don't know what. In all probability, he probably made a nice profit. And if you get put in jail for 5 years and you make $100,000, that's $20,000 a year. That's a rather decent salary for going to jail. Read that one. It's remarkable. You pick up your newspapers and magazines every day and you see this kind of thing in it. Gullibility is another quality. And an example I'd like to use of gullibility is deodorized allium sativum. It's one of my favorites. A gastrointestinal product for the relief of ulcer symptoms, as, quote, reported in a leading medical journal, unquote, was advertised to contain deodorized allium sativum as its most significant substance. In a different form, this is what you got in this GI medicine. Would you fall for it? Allium sativum is commonly known as garlic. The use of technical terminology may fool the gullible person. The person who is not going to be caught by this is going to read the label and somehow, somewhere get a source of information to look it up and not be fooled by it. If you look up and you see that deodorized allium sativum is used and you see that this is nothing but garlic, chances are pretty good you will develop a resistance against buying that product. Ignorance is another characteristic that we have. And I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, compound I can use to demonstrate the ignorance concept is this iron tonic. Iron tonics for tired blood have a special appeal to those people who are ignorant regarding the facts about normal fatigue and anemia. Feelings of fatigue may be due to many causes, the symptoms of which should not be masked by these tonics. From a medical point of view, it's not wise to take these because you might hide some symptoms that need to be there when you finally go to your physician. So there's a danger involved in using it from a masking of symptoms. The uninformed person, or we could say the ignorant person, has little protection against the logic presented in the commercials for these products. A half-truth is involved, a half-truth is blown out of proportion, and a person falls for it. I might add that this particular product lost the first round of the last word I have, lost the first round in court action against it for the false advertising. The implication that tired blood results from iron deficiency anemia or this type of thing, or that normal fatigue is iron deficiency anemia, is just simply not so. Yeah, there are people that suffer from this disorder. They are relatively rare. They are not common in our society, common enough that this would help. By the way, if a person truly had iron deficiency anemia, scientists have testified that the recommended dosage of this would not be enough for them if they truly had it. The other people that buy this are usually suffering from poor physical condition or normal fatigue or staleness, emotional problems, and the iron tonic is certainly not going to be a factor for them. A person that has iron deficiency anemia might be described as a person who has been sick for a long period of time, drastic poor nutrition, undergone major surgery, lost a lot of blood as a result of being hit by a train. This type of thing is where a person would suffer from iron deficiency anemia. Another quality I described is a quality of responsiveness. And the example I'd like to use here is the buffered analgesic. The commercials advertising buffered painkillers tell you that their product is faster and more effective than plain aspirin. You try them, you believe what you were told, and are ready to give a testimonial to that fact. Well-known personalities in our country have done so. Most of our commercials are done by rather famous movie stars or stage celebrities. I like to quote, in a recent study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, if that sounds familiar, I want to quote some factual information. No striking differences were demonstrated between buffered aspirin and plain aspirin so far as stomach upset is concerned, rapidity of onset, peak effect, and duration of the analgesic has some problems we would be concerned. No difference at all in an independent study reported in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Plain analgesic or aspirin compounds versus the buffered type. The main points of significance. This was not easier on the stomach, and that's one of the claims they make, that it's easier on your stomach. There was no difference at all, significant difference in the rapidity of onset in terms of the effect that this gave you. There was no difference at all in terms of the peak effect, that this was just as good as plain aspirin. And there was no difference at all in terms of giving you longer lasting protection from this. But you pay a lot more for it. And as long as it's pennies, I guess you'll continue to be fooled by it. How do we fall for it? We're told certain things in a commercial, and we take them, and we're so convinced that the commercial was accurate, we take them and we say, oh yeah, it worked, it was right. We respond to what we were told would occur, and we truly, actually believe that this is better. Studies have demonstrated otherwise. And the last characteristic I'd like to demonstrate or talk about is the characteristic we all have from time to time of stupidity. And an example I'd like to use here, and I thought for a long time on which one to pick, and the most current thing I could talk about was the chiropractic philosophy. Thus far in our workshop, speakers have demonstrated overwhelming unanimity in their response to the chiropractic issue. You people that have been listening to all of the presentations I think it's almost safe to say all but one of our speakers have spoken out on this issue. Anybody who has heard the evidence and the statements made would, in my opinion, be demonstrating unbelievable stupidity in seeking out the treatment of the chiropractic. In addition to these qualities, we as consumers are at a disadvantage because we have an erroneous impression of the quack. And this is hurting us to some degree in terms of the question why people go to quacks. We're looking at the problem as it occurred 100 years ago. The snake oil salesman is gone. He's not with us anymore, at least not to any degree. I might add that a few years ago, a corn doctor set up shop about 2 blocks from the University of Indiana Medical School. He doctored people out of his little wagon in the street. Sort of an interesting situation. 2 blocks from the medical science seat of our state. Set up shop and I understand made quite a bit of money. So you see this once in a while, but for the most part, this type of fellow, the snake oil salesman, is gone. In his place, we now find the, quote, cancer clinic, unquote, or, quote, scientific diet faddists, unquote. We're getting it from a different angle and a different way. The witch doctor's tom-tom is no longer heard because he is now publishing professionally illustrated pamphlets and brochures. He doesn't have to beat on a drum to get his message across. He has, well, nice-looking materials and pamphlets that he's handing out to you. And if any of you haven't seen these, I would like very much, if you have time to see me sometime, be happy to point out some of these to you. We've demonstrated them from time to time. The flashy con man is rarely seen these days because he has taken on the look of Madison Avenue. And the last point I'd like to make is that the medicine show has been closed. It's been closed by newspaper, magazine ads, and television commercials. We no longer have to go and listen to them bouncing the tambourines. All we have to do is sit down in front of our television set and we can see that kind of thing going on. Sort of interesting in the film we saw the other day, some of you that saw the resource session last Friday. If you remember the one of the scenes where the phony diet product, the kelp, was being pushed on the person, do you remember what the soundtrack of the film was like? Did you pick up the very sophisticated insinuation there? Bum, 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 bum. The beating of the drum. I don't know if you picked that up in the soundtrack. I thought it was quite well done. It wasn't a medicine show going on. It was a professionally done lecture. If we're looking for the medicine show, we're going to be fooled. It's not there. But if we go listen to a famous speaker, we might be fooled. This increased sophistication occurring in the past several decades has made millions of people more vulnerable to the health quackery issue. We continue to go to quacks because many of them appear to be legitimate. And we're looking for something that doesn't exist any longer or exists as a rare situation. Now, after relating some of the human qualities that we possess which allow the quack to prey on us, and observing the techniques he has used in disguising his identity, it would be negligence on my part not to discuss some means of protection that we have against the quack, and from an individual point of view. For in spite of numerous public, private, and professional health agencies at all governmental levels, and I think I could say doing a magnificent job, these people who are dedicated to protecting the consumer against health quackery, the real protection that we have is only as effective as the individual's ability to resist the health quackery issue. And in my opinion, there are 4 primary avenues for this resistance. The first one, become aware of the health quackery problem at the national, state, and local levels. When we talk about $1 billion a year spent at interstate at the national level, this should be enough to make you sit back and think. And when we talk about another $1 billion being spent at the local and state levels, that should reinforce you're sitting back and taking notice. We are talking about a major industry in our country. The estimate of about $2 billion a year, and it's a safe estimate. It's a conservative estimate. It could very well be much more than that. Become aware of the health quackery problem at the national, state, and local levels. It is big business. Become aware of the complexities of the health quackery problem. Sometimes we're fooled because we're just overpowered with the complexities involved. Become a healthy skeptic. And I want to qualify that skeptic word by saying healthy skeptic. I mean, you can become a skeptic to such a degree that you develop emotional problems. We don't want you to solve one health problem by developing another one in the emotional category. Be a doubter, an unbeliever. You're sitting in front of the television set and somebody tells you a buffered product is faster, your immediate reaction should be, oh yeah, prove it. And when you pick up a commercial that comes out in the newspaper and somebody says something about a health issue, you should say, oh yeah? Why? How? When? Where? I don't believe it. That should be your immediate reaction. Prove it, prove it, prove it constantly. What are the facts? What does science say? Healthy skepticism is a great protection that you can have. The fourth point, increase your confidence in medical science. This is a point you probably haven't heard before, but it's my personal opinion that it's a very strong and important point in a fight against the quack. Usually the people that go to quacks are disillusioned about medical science. And certainly medical science is not perfect, as was testified in this workshop. But for the most cases, I think we can say with great safety that medical science is the best we have. And we should increase our confidence in it in spite of some minor weaknesses. And we can achieve these points through the process of, this is my little quote, educational immunization. It's a little phrase I thought up. Educational immunization is the way we can build up these four primary avenues for resisting the quack. Health education is really no more than the educational aspects of preventive medicine. We're talking about preventive medicine in immunizations. Then what I'm talking about is a preventive aspect through educational immunization. So to you teachers and prospective teachers, I want to issue this challenge. Prepare yourselves. Immunize yourselves educationally. Read, study, explore, inquire, debate. Speak up in a responsible manner. Build up the best possible background you can and use it for your own protection, for your family and your friends, and finally for the influence you will have in our communities and schools with our future generations. Thank you for listening to me.